Hello Americans channel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
Grandma sells her house but keeps the shed, then the new owners look inside. This old grandma gave the new home residents the fright of their lives shortly after selling her house. She was unable to live in her family home anymore and reluctantly agreed to sell the property. She sold everything but refused to part with this one particular old shed. Then the new owners looked inside. Olivia and her husband, Walter, had built the old farmhouse from the ground up. Over 60 years, it became their family's heaven. Birthdays, holidays, and quiet evenings made it a home full of love. Even after Walter passed away, Olivia stayed, clinging to memories that lived in every corner of the creaky, cherished structure. Time eventually caught up. Olivia could no longer tend the garden or manage the stairs. Her children grew worried as the home turned from a joy into a burden. Though it broke her heart, Olivia gave in to their pleas. She agreed to sell the house, but her agreement came with one hidden condition. She didn't tell her children everything. They thought she was letting go, but Olivia quietly held on to one small piece, the old shed. She couldn't bear to part with it. While her children and the realtors focused on selling the home, Olivia remained fixed on that one wooden structure hidden beneath the trees. Real estate agents admired the property's charm. Olivia insisted on attending every tour, trailing behind slowly, her smile warm but guarded. Her eyes always drifted toward the back corner of the land. When agents glanced at the shed, Olivia brushed it off. "That old thing? Not for sale," she joked, though her tone said otherwise. The shed was small, lopsided, and looked like it housed tools or junk. Olivia's protectiveness was unusual. Her children remembered being forbidden to enter it when they were young, told it held dangerous equipment. As adults, they never questioned it. When one son asked about it, Olivia replied vaguely and the topic was dropped. No one pushed her for answers. Olivia had never lied to them, so they trusted her. But when the realtors completed their final inspection, one of them noticed her eyes constantly darted toward the shed. Even when spoken to directly, her attention lingered on that back corner of the land as if guarding something deeply personal. Eventually, a young couple fell in love with the house. They adored the kitchen and the orchard, but asked, more than once, about the shed. Olivia smiled and repeated, "That's not part of the deal." She had her lawyer hide a clause at the end of the contract reserving ownership of that one patch of land. And her idea worked. The couple signed the deed to the house without ever realizing the contingency of their signing. They thought they had just bought the cutest family home with a large piece of property, a place they could form to their liking. And they could, except for one tiny spot. Jonah and Judith were thrilled with their new home. It was charming, spacious, and filled with warmth. Their 10-year-old son, Caleb, immediately picked the bedroom overlooking the orchard. They spent their first day unpacking, arranging furniture, and smiling at the cozy atmosphere. The tiny shed on the far corner barely crossed their minds. Judith smiled while organizing the kitchen and uncovering vintage tiles. Jonah fixed curtain rods while humming. Caleb explored the attic, drew chalk monsters on the driveway, and gave the home his playful touch. They trimmed hedges, cleared weeds, and reseeded the lawn. Life felt peaceful, and the small, quiet shed remained untouched for now. The following weekend, they tackled projects inside the house. Jonah and Judith painted the guest bedroom while Caleb played with his action figures. They talked about hosting Thanksgiving that year. Despite their busy days, none of them gave serious thought to the lonely shed. It simply sat there, forgotten at the garden's edge. But on Sunday afternoon, Caleb wandered toward the back of the property. Following the gravel path through tall grass, he found the locked shed. He tugged at the thick padlock, surprised by its strength. "Weird," he muttered. Although the encounter sparked curiosity, Caleb said nothing to his parents and returned to playing instead. The first week passed without issue. They cooked meals together, played board games, and started building a routine. Caleb seemed to love the house just as much as they did. Judith joked that the house had good energy. Jonah nodded in agreement, but what they did not know was that someone was watching them from the trees. One night around 2 a.m., Caleb entered his parents' bedroom looking pale. Someone was in the garden, he whispered. Jonah sat up fast. Caleb said he saw a person near the trees walking toward the shed. "I swear I saw a light in there," he added. Jonah and Judith exchanged a wide-eyed look. Jonah threw on his robe and boots and told them to stay inside. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the chilly night. The grass was wet, and moonlight cast long shadows. Jonah followed Caleb's directions to the far corner. But when he got there, everything was still. The padlock on the shed had remained in place. Jonah walked the entire yard, flashlight sweeping across bushes and trees. He checked behind the tool shed and near the porch, but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of movement. Back inside, he crouched next to Caleb and said, "There's no one out there." Caleb frowned. "But I saw something, Dad, I swear." Later that night, as Jonah got into bed, he whispered, "Do we even have a key for that shed?" Judith blinked. "What shed?" Jonah pointed. "That one by the trees. It's locked." Judith looked puzzled. "I've never seen a key for it." They stared at the ceiling, unsettled by the thought. "Let's go back to bed, honey," Judith said to her husband, who had already placed his body beside hers. "We'll figure it out tomorrow, but for now, a good night's rest would do us good." It was a wise choice to get rested because they needed all the focus they could muster in the coming days. The next morning, Jonah looked through the property documents again. The shed was never mentioned when it came to the property they owned. There were blueprint outlines for the house, the barn, and the orchard, but no detail about the structure tucked in the corner. "Strange," Jonah mumbled. "Maybe the realtor simply forgot to add it." Jonah told himself it was probably just old storage. After all, it was a dusty old building, barely standing upright. Maybe it was Olivia's garden shed. He didn't want to worry Judith or Caleb. Still, he found himself glancing out the kitchen window toward the trees more than once that day. "Dad, why don't we go into the shed?" Caleb asked over breakfast. Jonah smiled nervously. "We don't have the key, buddy, and besides, it's probably just old junk in there." Caleb nodded but kept staring out the window toward the shed, and very same night the strange occurrences continued. That night, neither Jonah nor Judith could sleep. Jonah kept replaying Caleb's words, haunted by the image of the locked shed. What if someone had been out there? Judith also tossed in bed after dreaming of someone knocking at the door. She woke with a dry mouth, unsettled by a silence that didn't feel right. They switched on one of those fake electronic candles to calm themselves. Maybe the cozy flickering against their bedroom wall could help them fall asleep. But candlelight wasn't able to help with what came next. This time, it wasn't Caleb entering their room that sparked commotion. Judith was about to close her eyes and doze off when a loud bang was heard from their backyard. Judith shot up straight in bed and looked around. Panicked, she noticed that her husband was already seated, meaning he also heard the sound. "What was that?" she whispered while shivering. Jonah rushed out of bed and ran toward the yard where the sound came from. Right before leaving the house, he paused for just a second, only to grab a broom that was leaning against the back door. If someone was indeed intruding on their property, he needed something to protect himself. The back door swung open and Jonah stood in the garden ready to face whatever was back there. He continuously paced around the grassy field, trying to spot any sign of movement. He saw a few knocked over trash cans near the back. They had just placed them there this afternoon to be filled with leaves during gardening. And now the trash cans lay all on their sides with leaves scattered around them. Someone or something had knocked them over, there was no doubt, but what or who? Jonah yelled across their lawn, asking whoever was out there to show himself, but nobody bothered responding. Eventually, he had to return inside the house, knowing he had failed to catch who did this. But one thing this failed operation did do, it put the family on edge, ready to discover what was really going on. They no longer doubted their son's previous observations. Something was going on here. As Jonah walked back to the house, he looked over his shoulder multiple times, and during most of those lookbacks, his gaze was fixated on that shed, which lay about 100 meters away from their back door. His thoughts told him that this all had to do with that strange tiny building. The next morning, Jonah and his family did not have a pleasant breakfast with a boiled egg and orange juice like the days before. This time they were in work mode from the moment they opened their eyes. They needed answers, and Jonah knew exactly where to start with his questions. The next morning, Jonah stood at the kitchen counter and called the lawyer listed on the deed. "Is the shed part of the property?" he asked. The lawyer hesitated. "Everything is yours except the small wooden shed near the tree line." Jonah blinked. "What do you mean?" "It's in the contract. Page 52, subpart B." Jonah flipped through the thick folder labeled Deed Property Info. Hidden among zoning forms and legal language was a clause stating, "Ownership of secondary structure remains with original owner, Olivia M. Whitmore." The shed still belonged to her. His skin prickled. She had kept it deliberately. But why? Jonah questioned the lawyer further. The man replied, "It was a last-minute request. I only wrote down what she told me." Jonah stared out the kitchen window. The shed looked smug, almost mocking. "She wasn't joking," he muttered. She'd held on to it with claws. That tiny building must have meant more to her than she let on. Jonah tapped his fingers on the windowsill. If Olivia still owned the shed, it made sense they never got a key. But then he saw movement. A shadow shifted along the edge of the woods. It walked straight toward the shed. Jonah squinted and his breath caught. It was Olivia herself. Jonah looked toward his phone, completely forgetting that the lawyer was still on the other end of the line. The suited man had provided all the answers he could provide, so Jonah no longer needed his services. "I have to go, bye," Jonah said bluntly before hanging up the phone to focus on the elderly woman in his yard. Jonah watched in disbelief as Olivia, moving with surprising ease, approached the shed. She pulled a key from her coat pocket and unlocked the heavy padlock. The creaking door swung open and warm light spilled out. Jonah realized the late-night figure Caleb had seen was Olivia. It had been her all along. He slipped on his coat and shoes, stepped outside quietly, and kept to the garden's edge. Olivia didn't seem to notice as he crept closer. She entered and exited the shed several times, clearly busy with something. Jonah crouched behind a hedge, heart pounding, watching the strange ritual unfold before him. Eventually, she disappeared inside and didn't return. The shed's door remained open, a crack, flickering light escaping through the gap. Jonah moved closer, careful not to snap any twigs. On the ground lay the discarded padlock and chain, tangled beside the entrance. What was she protecting inside? Jonah reached the side of the shed and pressed against its wooden wall. A faint mechanical hum came from inside. He peeked through a small crack in the boards. There were tools and a workbench, but also a large metal machine in the middle of the room, softly vibrating beneath the overhead light. He stepped up to the door and slowly pushed it further open. The hinges groaned, but Olivia didn't respond. The light flickered above, and Olivia was nowhere in sight, though he was sure she hadn't exited. The shed was small, barely 8 square meters. She couldn't have just vanished. Jonah stepped inside cautiously. He circled the machine, identifying it as a generator, far too powerful to just light the shed. Jonah scratched his head, confused. The air smelled like dried herbs and something old. He followed the wires and saw several looping across the floor, disappearing into a hole beneath a loose wooden hatch. Confused, Jonah knelt beside the hole. "There's a passageway down here," he whispered. He opened the hatch and found a narrow stairwell leading to a lit basement level beneath the small shed. Only a small area was visible from where he stood. The rest of the room was shrouded in mystery. Jonah took a deep breath and stepped onto the creaking stairs. The air smelled of lavender and aged paper, which was odd. The hum of the generator above faded. At the bottom, a larger room opened up, softly lit by ceiling lights. Shelves lined the walls. Trinkets, books, and old keepsakes filled the space. In the center of the room sat Olivia, gently rocking and clutching a photo. Her shoulders trembled with quiet sobs. Jonah stepped closer. The photo showed her and Walter, young and smiling. Olivia hadn't noticed him yet. The room felt peaceful and sacred, filled with grief, love, and decades of memories. "Olivia?" Jonah said softly. She flinched, then looked up, red-eyed but not angry, just tired. "You found it," she whispered. Jonah scanned the room, Walter's uniform, medals, journals, a workbench, and old boots. "This is all that's left of him," she said. "I couldn't bring it to that small funeral home apartment. It wouldn't fit. When the kids were young, the shed was filled with tools, dangerous things. But after Walter passed, I cleared it out. I filled it with him instead. His memories. Our memories." Jonah only nodded, instantly understanding the pain of this elderly woman. She had a reason for holding on to this shed. She was guarding her heart. "I just want to visit," Olivia whispered. "Keep it how it is." Jonah nodded and then said something Olivia didn't expect. "We'll never come down unless you invite us. This is yours. We'll keep it safe, but please come with me to the surface." They walked upstairs together, side by side. "Can I tell my wife?" Jonah asked respectfully. Jonah told Judith everything that afternoon. He didn't describe the items or the way Olivia cried. He only said it was a space dedicated to Olivia's husband. She turned it into a memory, and it means everything to her. Judith didn't argue. She nodded and held his hand. "We'll leave it be," she said. Olivia started visiting once a month. Jonah would unlock the shed before she arrived and relock it after she left. Caleb never asked again. The family lived their life around the corner of land that wasn't theirs, not truly. And over time, it became not strange but sacred, a quiet part of the home.